Today I'll show you how to punish the Italian game the right way. I'll teach you the key counterattacking ideas that turn this classic opening into a winning opportunity for black. Let's get started. The game begins with pawn to e4, and you reply with pawn to e5, immediately fighting for control of the center. White continues with knight to f3, attacking your pawn on e5. You defend calmly with knight to c6, protecting the pawn and developing a piece at the same time. Then white plays bishop to c4, aiming at the sensitive f7 square. This setup is known as the Italian game, one of the most popular and classical openings in chess. In this position, black usually chooses between knight to f6 or bishop to c5. Both moves are completely sound because they develop pieces and prepare to castle. If you decide on knight to f6, you must be ready to face the dangerous fried liver attack, which can become very sharp and tactical. Proper preparation is essential to handle those complications. If you prefer to avoid that line, you can instead play bishop to c5, entering the traditional Italian setup. This keeps the position solid and flexible. White typically responds with pawn to c3, preparing to advance pawn to d4 and challenge the center. Another benefit of pawn to c3 is that it prevents black's knight from jumping to d4, since that square is now controlled. However, the main strategic goal is clearly to support pawn to d4 and gain more central space. Black then continues with knight to f6, further developing a piece, increasing pressure on white's pawn on e4, and preparing to castle on the next move. It is a very natural and strong continuation. Notice something important here. In this position, black no longer needs to fear knight to g5. If white tries to attack the pawn on f7, black can simply castle kingside. This move not only defends everything, but also improves king's safety. White's early attack achieves nothing meaningful. But what happens if white captures on f7? Surprisingly, that capture is actually favorable for black. After the exchange, black gains two minor pieces for a rook. In the middle game, two well-coordinated minor pieces are often stronger than a single rook, especially in open and active positions. White's rooks, meanwhile, remain stuck behind pawn structures and cannot easily enter the game. Black's bishops and knights are already active and harmoniously placed. Development is clearly in black's favor, and the initiative belongs to black. Since knight to g5 is too premature, white has other options. One ambitious idea is to strike in the center with pawn to d4, leading to sharper and more forcing play. Alternatively, white may choose a quieter move like pawn to d3, reinforcing the pawn on e4 and postponing central action. This keeps the position solid and flexible, allowing white to build up gradually. Now let's examine the most testing continuation, pawn to d4. This is white's most aggressive choice. After we study that, we will also look at pawn to d3, which leads to a slower, more positional battle, along with the ideal setup for black. We begin with pawn to d4, the sharpest line. Years ago, this variation had a dangerous reputation for black. However, theory has shown that with a few accurate and logical moves, black can equalize comfortably. When white pushes pawn to d4, they attack both your pawn on e5 and your bishop on c5. The natural response is pawn takes on d4. Now white threatens your bishop and hopes to gain time by attacking it. If you simply retreat the bishop, white can advance their pawns, chase your knights, and build a powerful pawn center. That could leave you cramped and passive. But there is a much stronger idea. Instead of moving backward, play bishop to b4, giving check to the king. This active move keeps the initiative and prepares to challenge white's center more directly. White usually blocks the check with knight to c3, which is the main move. Because the knight on c3 is pinned to the king, you can now play knight takes pawn on e4. The knight cannot recapture due to the pin. At the same time, your knight on e4 and your bishop on b4 both pressure white's knight on c3. At this moment, white often castles kingside. This is a tricky resource. Many players with black lose quickly here because they are unaware of a classic trap from the Italian game. After castling, the knight on c3 is no longer pinned. That means it is free to capture your knight on e4. Therefore, you should seriously consider capturing on c3 yourself before white does. When you capture the knight, white recaptures with a pawn, attacking your bishop. Here is where many players go wrong. They play bishop takes on c3, thinking they are simplifying. But this move actually fails to queen to b3. White is even ready to sacrifice a rook if necessary, because they are building a powerful queen and bishop battery aimed at f7. On the next move, bishop takes on f7 can follow, and black's king comes under a devastating attack. That position can quickly become winning for white. So instead of falling into that trap, we return to the critical idea of the position. In these structures, there is one move you must always remember. pawn to d5. This is the central concept in many lines of the Italian setup. Why is pawn to d5 so strong? First, it frees your bishop. Later, you can develop it to bishop to e6 or even bishop to g4, increasing pressure and improving coordination. Second, it claims more central space and gives your pieces greater mobility. Third, it stops white from pushing a pawn forward to chase your knight away, keeping your position stable. Fourth, and very importantly, it blocks the so-called Italian bishop on c4, cutting off its attack on the sensitive f7 square. One move solves multiple problems at once: development, space, king safety, and central control. That is why playing pawn to d5 early is absolutely essential for black in these positions. In many variations, pawn to d5 works as a powerful counterstrike. Just like in this position, white attacks your bishop, but with pawn to d5, you immediately attack their bishop in return and shut down their initiative. That is why, once you truly understand this central idea, this line is not dangerous for black at all. On the next move, your plan is simple: complete development and castle. Now let's examine white's main attempts. If white captures your bishop, you calmly recapture. You remain a pawn up and are ready to castle on the following move. Your position is solid and healthy. If white gives a check, there is no need to panic, or you can simply block it and continue developing. If white plays bishop to g5, trying to pin your knight, it is not a serious threat. You respond with pawn to f6, forcing the bishop to retreat. After that, you castle safely and your position is perfectly comfortable. Another idea for white is queen to e2, aligning the queen and bishop against your knight on e4. At first glance, this seems annoying because your king is temporarily tied to the defense of that knight. If you castle immediately, you would lose it. The solution is straightforward: play bishop to e6. This move is very practical. It blocks the e-file, reducing white's attacking chances, and also reinforces your pawn structure. With this setup, your position remains secure and coordinated. Should white attempt knight to g5, aiming to open the e-file and create threats, you can answer with queen to d5. This is a strong, centralizing move. It defends your bishop and central pawns, connects your rooks, keeps both kingside and queenside castling as viable options. There is no need to memorize long forcing lines. Your main goals are simple: finish development, castle, and maintain central stability. If white captures your pawn at some point, you can recapture without concern. Although material may appear equal afterward, remember that you were previously ahead, so white is only restoring balance. After potential queen exchanges, the position often favors black. You can play king to d7, stepping out of pins and activating your king early, an important factor in endgames. Your long-term plan is to establish a knight on the powerful d5 square. That outpost is extremely strong and often decides the game. If white tries rook to e5 to interfere with your plan, you can calmly continue with pawn to c6, firmly preparing knight to d5. White may attempt bishop to g5, hoping to create activity, but this does not change the evaluation. Your knight will reach d5 anyway. At first glance, white's pieces might seem slightly more active. However, the reality is different. Black enjoys a strong central knight on d5, a well-placed centralized king, a dangerous passed pawn advancing toward promotion, targets on white's queenside pawns. Your knight keeps pressure on pawns such as b4, while your rooks are ready to become active on open files. This is not just equality, it is a very favorable endgame for black. With correct play, your structural advantages and piece activity give you excellent winning chances. If you found this explanation helpful, make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.